Hello, Jordan Sheridan live. Status Coup. It is Wednesday, September the 24th, 2025, in the United Corporations of America, which is definitely a distress signal. I did a video this morning on new developments in the Luigi Mangione case when Colin behind the scenes was editing it, and I saw even more breaking news, which made the video I did kind of irrelevant at this point. So I figured, you know what? I'm just going to go live because to me, what we're about to go through, I am not a lawyer. I have watched a lot of Law and Order. But to me, what we're about to go through might be essentially the absolute total disregard that the Trump administration shows for the actual rule of law. Could be potentially Trump's authoritarianism, his administration, his Department of Justice, basically spitting on the law, could be what ultimately leads to a mistrial. Could be in the case of Luigi Mangione, the alleged killer of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. There's a lot to get to, so smash that like button, share this live stream. A couple public service announcements first. We have covered the Mangione case more than any other outlet in the land, corporate outlet or independent outlet. We have been outside that courthouse for every appearance Mangione had, even when it fell out of the news, even when the corporate media no longer cared, even when independent media wasn't covering it much anymore. This takes resources. We were just out there for the last court hearing, and we'd like to be out there if there is criminal trials starting early 2026. We'd like to be covering it daily. That takes resources and money too. So if you appreciate our independent on-the-ground reporting, please support us, StatusCoup.com/join. Speaking of that independent on-the-ground reporting, we will be on the ground in Chicago as soon as tomorrow. John Farina, our cameraman, is there. We are going to be covering the latest acceleration and escalation of Trump's Gestapo ICE troops in Chicago. That also costs money. Third PSA, we have hired a new reporter. He will be starting next week. I think you're going to like him. That also takes resources. A lot of things happening. So please support us, StatusCoup.com/join, StatusCoup.com/join. There's a whole lot of outlets begging you for money, and they're just sitting in the studio, kind of bloviating. We are one of the few actually in the trenches, rolling up our sleeves on the ground. So I'll give you that. I'll give you those public service announcements a little bit later. All right, let's start. Obviously, we were on the ground last week covering the Luigi Mangione court appearance, where the breaking news happened while I was speaking with his supporters that a judge dropped the terrorism charges against him, which to me, whatever you think of Mangione and what he allegedly did, to me, the terrorism charges were always ridiculous and were definitely a slippery slope. After that, you had quite a lot of, I would say, momentum on the Mangione side. His lawyers, who are doing a good job, we'll get to them later, filed a motion seeking to get rid of the death penalty case that the Trump administration brought against Mangione, which we'll get to that later. Pretty unprecedented how quickly they brought this death penalty case against Mangione. Normally, it would take the Department of Justice about a year to vet and decide on whether to bring a capital case. They did it in just a few months. And then Donald Trump went on TV essentially linking Mangione to Charlie Kirk's assassination. Not in terms of like he had something to do with it, but trying to group Mangione in with quote unquote, radical left terrorists. So Mangione's lawyers yesterday filed a court motion basically pointing out that the president of the United States going on national television and top officials in his Department of Justice then circulating his interview, basically calling Mangione a radical left-winger, basically stating that, kind of trying to draw a parallel or a link between Mangione and Kirk, was illegal because it's prejudices a potential jury. So I am going to read to you, it's not a long motion, it's about 5 pages, the motion that Mangione's lawyers filed yesterday, which prompted immediate response from the judge today, like an hour or two ago, basically stating that the Trump Department of Justice has violated Mangione's rights to a fair trial. And then we'll get to the implications of that. Please smash the like button. Please share this live stream. Really important that we get this out, because this isn't just about Luigi Mangione. This is about an authoritarian regime, which is the Trump administration, abusing the law. This is about an authoritarian regime trying to brand pretty much anyone they don't like, even alleged killers, as terrorists, and what that could mean for the rest of us. And this is also about the daily terrorism that is the murderous for-profit predatory health insurance system, which the corporate media does not want to cover. So let's start with the motion that was filed yesterday, so you have the context and the background for why the judge ruled today that the Trump Department of Justice violated Mangione's rights. And again, I'll give shout outs for super chats, and please, extra shout outs if you sign up as a paying member during the stream. Again, we're the only ones covering this case on the ground. When we're not on the ground, I've covered every court motion for this case. It takes resources. We just hired a full-time producer and a new reporter, and we're going on the ground tomorrow to Chicago. Hey, if you want actual living, breathing, independent journalism, you have to help us build it. We don't have funding from United Healthcare, Wall Street, the vulture capitalist, corrupt fucks buying off Democrats and Republicans. Our funding comes from you. All right, let's start with this motion from yesterday. This was filed by Mangione's attorneys. Since the filing of Mr. Mangione's motion challenging the constitutionality of the death penalty, hereafter referred to as the death penalty motion, on September 19th, 2025, the government has continued to prejudice his right to a fair trial in a death penalty case in violation of his Fifth and Eighth Amendment rights. On September 18th, the President of the United States appeared on Fox News Channel and stated that Mangione, quote, shot someone in the back as clear as you're looking at me. He shot him right in the middle of the back, instantly dead. Colin, let's play that clip from Trump about Mangione.
Think about Mangione. He shot someone in the back. As clear as you're looking at me or I'm looking at you, he looked like a pure assassin. I was surprised, actually. You know, you would have thought this guy would have been at a central casting in the movie, and maybe he was. But he think of what he did. He openly, it's not like, gee, there's a question. If there's a question, you can understand it, maybe. But there's not a question. He walked up to a man, didn't give him warning, didn't say turn around, didn't do like the Old West where you have a gunfight, you know, you each have a gun. He shot him right in the middle of the back, instantly dead. And now he's like, I'm watching, the girls are going crazy for him. This is a sickness. This is, you know, this really has to be studied and investigated. It's not possible.
So it goes without saying that the President of the United States going on TV to the, whatever you think of Fox News, the #1 rated news channel in America, and not using the term alleged, just declaring him guilty, and this would go for anyone, not just Mangione, would be prejudicial to a jury. It might influence a jury who would have seen it. And there are laws against that, criminal codes against that. But obviously Trump's not really so rigid in terms of the law. So as the, and keep those super chats coming and we'll read them at the end, as the court motion continued on September 19th, this Fox News clip was then tweeted by a White House affiliated X account, Rapid Response 47. A screenshot of the post appears below, which Colin is showing you right now. This post was then tweeted by an account belonging to an individual whose LinkedIn page states that he is the Deputy Director of the Department of Justice Office of Public Affairs, working for the Attorney General of the United States. With the added statement, POTUS is absolutely right. And then they show that screenshot, which was then deleted. POTUS is absolutely right. Again, this is basically the #2 in the Department of Justice Communications Office. In April, Pam Bondi took action and directed federal prosecutors to seek the death penalty in this case. The following day, September 20th, happens to have been my birthday, no big deal. Identified as belonging, this post identified as belonging to the Chief of Staff and Associate Deputy Attorney for the Deputy Attorney General, retweeted the same post. A screenshot of this now deleted post is provided below with a red arrow indicating where it states that it had been retweeted by this account. On September 22nd, the White House press secretary referred to Mangione as a left-wing assassin who shot United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson right in the back in New York City while speaking at a White House press briefing. Next, in an official White House press release dated September 22nd, titled "President Trump Isn't Backing Down from Crushing Radical Left Violence," Mangione's name was referenced in support of the president's designation of a domestic terrorist organization. They're referring to Trump's absurd and dangerous executive order declaring Antifa, which is not an organized group, as a terrorist organization. And finally, on the evening, all right, before we get to Stephen Miller, let's state the obvious. You didn't have to go to law school to understand. I mean, anyone in the Department of Justice, but we're talking about like the number 2 communications officer and then people kind of high up to the Attorney General. You're not supposed to comment. I mean, unless you're like the district attorney or the prosecutor. And in that case, you're supposed to use the term alleged, but you're not supposed to comment your opinions, basically declaring a defendant guilty in this country because it could taint prejudice, but really taint the jury. You have the amateur clowns in Trump's Department of Justice who spit on the law. I mean, hell, the Attorney General is basically a fucking bimbo sycophant for Trump. She's acting as his personal attorney. And she has, I think, violated the law when it comes to Mangione. 7 ways to Sunday. We'll get to that a little bit later. You're not, I mean, it's completely illegal, amateur, and absurd to be basically like retweeting and tweeting that this guy's guilty and he's a left-wing assassin and he's part of the radical left wing. I mean, you are handing Mangione's attorneys either a mistrial or certain charges being thrown out, or if he gets convicted, damn good chance on appeal, on top of all the other things that have happened that are pretty abnormal, like prosecutors in New York accidentally eavesdropping on Mangione's private confidential phone calls with his lawyers, prosecutors accidentally obtaining over 120 pages of Mangione's HIPAA-protected medical records. And now you have the Department of Justice just tweeting and like they're fucking, you know, on TikTok or something, basically calling this guy guilty. I mean, put aside what you think of him, because some people in the audience don't like him. Some people support him. I mean, you're handing him a gift. You are literally, I mean, I don't want to say definite because this is the United Corporations of America and judges typically rule in favor of the wealthy, the government, and do what they want. But in terms of criminal code, which we're going to get to the specific code here that's been violated, I mean, it's pretty black and white. And it is completely barred what they did. Trump going on TV talking about it, calling him guilty. Pam Bondi in the past has not used allege, has just come out straight up saying he did it. And now high up officials in the Department of Justice tweeting and retweeting that he's guilty. I'll tell you, they are pretty screwed. And they might have handed Mangione a gift. Getting back to the motion. And finally, on the evening of September 23rd, the White House Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy appeared on Fox News and stated, quote, "Of course the healthcare CEO was brutally gunned down by another self-described so-called anti-fascist." Let's play that clip from today's modern day Joseph Goebbels, Stephen Miller.
Of course, the healthcare CEO was brutally gunned down by another self-described so-called anti-fascist that was then celebrated by other self-described anti-fascists, who, of course, are really communist revolutionaries.
Oh, you caught me eating a chip. I'm sorry. Is that it? Okay, so you already have the president doing this. Now you have his deputy chief of staff, who's a really scary fucking fascist, if you ask me, and just gave a speech at the Charlie Kirk Memorial, which was more like a Christian revival fest, literally plagiarized from Hitler's propagandist Joseph Goebbels. This is happening in America, folks. And meanwhile, you have an opposition party, the Democratic Party, not out in the streets protesting, not out in the streets trying to shut down the government against these fucking lunatic fascists. I digress. But the motion continued. The government very well knows this statement from Miller to be false, as they are in possession of his alleged extensive journal writings, talking about Mangione, where the writer never once mentions being anti or pro-fascist. The White House Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy then retweeted this Fox News Channel clip to his 1.5 million X followers. See below with a red arrow indicating that it was reposted by this account. So they post the account that had Rapid Response 47. That's basically Trump's Rapid Response social media account. And Stephen Miller retweeted his own stupidity. And I personally love the calling or linking Mangione to a communist revolutionary. I mean, just deranged. By the way, welcome new Status Coup member Smokey Gray Beard. Welcome new Status Coup member Kelly Lynn. Now we're talking. And if you came to this late, reminder, we've been out there on the ground covering every single Mangione court appearance. We would like to be out there when the trial begins, if it's not declared a mistrial before. That's going to take a lot of resources to be out there daily. We are independently funded, and we're going on the ground starting tomorrow in Chicago to cover Trump's ICE invasion there, which is literally abducting people like we've seen in LA, DC, and throwing them in unmarked vans. So our cameraman just got there today, and we'll be covering that. I know times are tough for everyone. If you don't have $5 a month, which by the way is 16 cents a day, totally get it. But if you do have $5 a month, that's all we're asking. StatusCoup.com/join. There's a whole lot of channels. Everybody, their mother and their dog has a YouTube channel, a Substack, and a whole lot of them are kind of sitting in a studio bloviating. We're actually out there, and I'm actually going to the city tomorrow to cover something else on the ground. So we try to be out there in the trenches covering what the corporate media covers up, and that's why it's so important. The more people we could get to support us at $5 a month, we do have plans higher than that too. At $5 a month, the more we could hire producers, reporters, editors, and expand our travel budget. So please support us if you can. All right. So the government has indelibly prejudiced Mangione by baselessly linking him to unrelated violent events and left-wing extremist groups, despite there being no connection or affiliation. A recent tragic high-profile murder has only increased this prejudicial rhetoric. They're referring to the Charlie Kirk murder. The attempts to connect Mangione with these incidents and paint him as a, quote, left-wing violent extremist are false, prejudicial, and part of a greater political narrative that has no place in any criminal case, especially one where the death penalty is at stake. Mr. Mangione in fact, does not support these violent actions, does not condone past or future political violence, nor is he in any way aligned with the group mentioned in the White House press release. On April 25th, 2025, this court ordered the acting United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York to advise the United States Attorney General, that would be Pam Bondi, to read Local Criminal Rule 23.1. On April 30th, the acting United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York informed the court that he had notified the Office of the Deputy Attorney General of the court's instruction per Local Criminal Rule 23.1, which confirmed that it would in turn notify the Attorney General. Accordingly, the Justice Department is knowingly and intentionally in violation of this court's order by continuing to make false and damaging statements in this death penalty case. So, I don't want to bore you. I'm going to get to the breaking news, which is a judge immediately responded to this, basically in favor of Mangione and against the Trump administration. But I think it's important that you know what the specific legal rule here is that the Trump administration is wiping its ass with and throwing in the garbage. This is Local Criminal Rule 23.1, free press, fair trial directives. And this is from the New York court's website. It is the duty of the lawyer or law firm and of non-lawyer personnel employed by a lawyer's office or subject to a lawyer's supervision, private investigators acting under the supervision of criminal defense lawyer, and government agents and police officers not to release or authorize the release of non-public information or opinion that a reasonable person would expect to be disseminated by means of public communication in connection with pending or imminent criminal litigation with which they are associated, if there's a substantial likelihood that the dissemination will interfere with a fair trial or otherwise prejudice the due administration of justice. There's more to it, but that's basically the core of it, which is shut your fucking mouth. Don't put out statements or information that should be confidential or opinion that could taint a potential jury who is supposed to come into it, assuming the defendant is innocent and the prosecution has to prove that he's guilty within a reasonable doubt. The Trump administration sure either didn't read this rule. This is the Attorney General, by the way, or they just don't care. They just don't care. So let's get to, and this happened very quick. I mean, this court motion by Mangione's lawyers were filed yesterday. A judge, I believe towards the end of the day, a judge ruled in their favor this morning. So that's how clearly a slam dunk case this is in terms of the Trump administration has violated Mangione's constitutional rights. This ruling from the judge ruled today. I'll read it to you. It's very short. On September 23rd, 2025, the defendant filed a letter advising the court of various public statements made about this case by various members of the government. It appears from this letter that multiple employees at the Department of Justice may have violated Local Criminal Rule 23.1, which I just read to you, and this court's order of April 25th, 2025, specifically identifying the structures of this rule for counsel and directing the prosecution team to ensure that the highest levels of the Department of Justice, up to and including Attorney General Bondi, so the judge is putting the Attorney General on blast, were aware of and understood they were bound by this rule. For the avoidance of doubt or confusion, the rule provides that in a criminal case, quote, it is the duty of the lawyer or law firm and of non-lawyer personnel employed by a lawyer's office or subject to a lawyer's supervision not to release or authorize the release of opinion that a reasonable person would expect to be disseminated by means of public communications in connection with pending criminal litigation with which they are associated, if there is a substantial likelihood that the dissemination will interfere with a fair trial or otherwise prejudice the due administration of justice. Local Criminal Rule 23.1. The rule goes on to state that any opinion as to the accused's guilt or innocence or as to the merits of the case or the evidence in the case is a matter that, quote, presumptively involves such a substantial likelihood. The statement referenced in the September 23rd letter by two high-ranking staff members at the DOJ, including the Office of Attorney General, appears to be in direct violation of this rule and the court's April 25th order. Accordingly, the government is directed to respond to those portions of the September 23rd letter by October 3rd, and to include with the response a sworn declaration from a person of suitable authority that explains the court how these violations occurred despite the court's April 25th order and what steps are being taken to ensure that no future violation occurs. The government is also directed to advise the Deputy Attorney General for dissemination with the department as appropriate that future violations may result in sanctions, which could include personal financial penalties, contempt of court findings, or relief specific to the prosecution of this matter. I'm going to repeat that because I think it's really, really important. Or relief specific to the prosecution of this matter. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but relief would be tossing out specific charges, a mistrial, tossing the case entirely. The government's declaration shall also include confirmation that this message has been conveyed to the Deputy Attorney General. The court will consider the other statements referenced in the September 23rd letter, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, that's a massive game changer, if you ask me. That is a massive, massive game changer. Essentially, for those that have not been following the legal michugash of all this, let me go through the list here. There's a federal case against Mangione. There's a New York State case against Mangione. And then there's the Pennsylvania case because that's where he was captured. They're all kind of linked together because all three are trying to use similar evidence. So if there's a mistrial in one, it could have a domino effect in another. But specifically here, the federal case is bringing the death penalty. Well, if there is ample evidence that there has been constitutional violations and legal violations to the defendant's right to a fair trial, there's a good chance that death penalty could be tossed. There's also a good chance that potentially a mistrial could be brought. There's also a good chance that based on all of this, they could just toss the case altogether. I don't want to give any misleading or, excite anyone that wants Mangione to go free. I don't know that for fact, but you have to look at the entire preponderance of abnormal, highly prejudicial things that have happened towards Mangione that his lawyers, if you follow Status Coup and all the videos I've done, have meticulously gone through. Number one, the Attorney General of the United States pursuing the death penalty against him, she did it in a historic, quick fashion. Let me read from Vanity Fair. This was about Mangione's fight against the Trump administration. One federal database listing hundreds of capital defendants authorized by the agency in the modern era going back decades lists Mangione as the 549th authorization with this extraordinary notation. Quote, Attorney General Pam Bondi directed authorization before the filing of an indictment or a Department of Justice meeting. She announced she was seeking the death penalty before he was indicted federally, is what that's saying. It would be more than 3 weeks before the Justice Department filed its death notice in a court of law. Instead, breaking with long-standing protocol and practice, the Attorney General announced her decision in a public forum. Luigi Mangione's murder of Brian Thompson, an innocent man and father of 2 young children, was a premeditated, cold-blooded assassination that shocked America, she said in a statement. After careful consideration, I've directed federal prosecutors to seek the death penalty in this case as we carry out President Trump's agenda to stop violent crime and make America safe again. Notice there is zero use of the word alleged in that. Quote, I've been handling capital cases for over 20 years. I've never seen anything like it. One longtime criminal defense lawyer who had represented high-profile capital defendants in the Southern District of New York, where federal prosecutors hope to try Mangione, told Vanity Fair. There's a very detailed process that is supposed to be followed that is spelled out in the Justice Manual, and for the Attorney General to just preempt that process is unheard of, as far as I know. Numerous sources with knowledge of how the Justice Department goes about seeking the death penalty confirmed the move was without modern precedent. Since Congress's reinstatement of the federal death penalty in 1988, no attorney general has ever publicly announced an intent to seek capital punishment under the circumstances Bondi did, leapfrogging local federal prosecutors and a comprehensive mitigation presentation by the defense. That's mitigation presentation means a presentation by the defense why the death penalty should not be brought. All before a grand jury had even returned an indictment charging death-eligible offenses. These and other steps are set out in the rulebook for how the federal death penalty ought to be pursued. Further pushing the prosecution into uncharted territory, the Justice Department published its announcement via a freshly opened Instagram account. You can't make this up. Created for Bondi's official use. Both the Justice Department and the U.S. Office for Southern District didn't respond to Vanity Fair. The publicity blitz stunned Mangione's defense team, as well as those with deep knowledge of how the federal death penalty under the law and well-settled practice must be sought. Karen Friedman-Ignifilov, a lawyer leading Mangione's defense, immediately cried foul, calling out the Justice Department as dysfunctional and barbaric. The decision, quote, goes against the recommendation of the local federal prosecutors, the law, and historic precedent, she said in her statement. So, from the beginning, they basically were throwing the book at this guy to try and make him an example against legal precedent, the way the Department of Justice normally works. Then you have his arrest in Pennsylvania, which is not has nothing to do with the Trump administration because this was in December before Trump came back in. But based on my reporting, based on the legal filings, and the Pennsylvania prosecutors have done nothing to actually debunk this. They basically violated Mangione's rights for 17 minutes before actually arresting him. They searched him without a warrant. They didn't tell him that he was not under arrest. They blocked him from ability to leave that McDonald's, and they didn't read him his Miranda rights, which could result in certain evidence being tossed that can't be used at trial. Then you have, in this case, the prosecutors accidentally eavesdropped on Mangione's private phone calls with his lawyers. Once they accidentally were piped in, they didn't just hang up. They listened for a bit. Then you have, recently I reported on this, the prosecutors were accidentally provided by Aetna over 120 pages of Mangione's private, confidential, HIPAA-protected medical records. I mean, this is a lot. Again, forget Mangione. You talk about any defendant here. You would have a damn good case if they're convicted on appeal that their rights were violated during the pretrial and during the trial. Depending on the judge, you could have a mistrial based on some of these abnormalities. Then you have the fact that he was charged with murder with a terrorism provision attached by the New York State, the New York City District Attorney, even though very experienced lawyers said this was an overreach and they were basically trying to apply terrorism to a case that isn't terrorism. Terrorism is typically charged in New York against serial killers, against cop killers, neither of which apply. So, like, that's just a few of the abnormalities, rigged elements of the case against Mangione, because they are not just pursuing a potential suspect here or a potential killer. They are defending the capitalist class. They are defending the oligarchy. It's about who the victim in this case was, not who the suspect is. That's why they are taking all these abnormal measures, and I think corrupt measures, to basically put this guy to death. You don't have to support what he did. You might condemn what he did. You might be neutral to what he did. Say, I don't support murder, but I'm not going to lose sleep over the victim. You might support what he did. I mean, we have a lot of people who think different things, but fundamentally, they are certainly trying to, I would say, treat this suspect differently because of who the victim was. Welcome new Status Coup member Samreen just signed up to our website. Welcome new Status Coup member Karina signed up to our website. And thank you for the $5 donation, Lawrence. By the way, if you're already a member and you want to pitch in more to help our on-the-ground reporting, you could donate statuscoup.com/donate. All right. So, again, I don't want to overexcite people, but this is not one thing. I mean, this is several things here. And I think based on this, I don't have any inside information. I would expect, what's today? Wednesday? I would expect by tomorrow or Friday that Mangione's attorneys filed to dismiss the case, the federal case. I could be wrong, but my strong guess is you're going to see a court motion from them within the next 24 to 48 hours to dismiss this case based on clear violations of the law. And honestly, based on the judge's quick ruling that I just read to you, basically saying the Department of Justice can't go around retweeting that and tweeting that he's a radical leftist. By the way, to be clear, what Trump did, what Stephen Miller did, what the DOJ officials did by tweeting it and saying Trump's right, you're basically linking Mangione with Charlie Kirk's murder. Not in the sense of, he was involved in the planning or directly associated, but you're trying to connect in a jury's mind the radical far left, which is the joke in the first place. They were already going to war with the radical far left before they even got this suspect who killed Kirk. It is still not clear who this was. Well, we know who it was, but what he was politically, he had reportedly not even voted the last several elections. According to his friends, he wasn't that political. The little information we have, it seems he lived with a transgender a man transitioning to a woman, and that might have played a role of it. It seems that he might have had a romantic relationship, but this was not some far left radical. And by the way, when Trump goes on TV calling Luigi Mangione a far left lunatic or whatever he said, I don't recall Trump calling the right winger who killed a Minnesota lawmaker a few months ago. Don't recall Trump calling that man a far right MAGA lunatic. I don't recall Trump saying peep about the MAGA person who went and shot up an FBI office in Cincinnati earlier this year. Don't recall Trump saying that the person who tried to assassinate him last year, actually reports came out that he was kind of shopping assassinations. He wasn't far right, far left. He was trying to find out where Joe Biden was going to be because he was open to trying to go for Joe Biden. I don't recall Trump saying anything other than mocking Nancy Pelosi's husband after a MAGA lunatic, psycho, nearly bashed his head in with a hammer, nearly killed Pelosi's husband. I think Pelosi's dirty and corrupt. I don't support trying to kill her or her husband. Nobody should. So very interesting that they go on here. They're trying to link Mangione with Antifa, call him a far left lunatic. Stephen Miller's trying to link him with communist revolutionaries. This is not allowed by law enforcement officials, by the Department of Justice, by the president. You can't do that if you are bringing a federal case against him. And to be clear, this is the federal case. If there's a mistrial, if the death penalty is taken off the plate, it could have a domino effect for the New York case as well. I'm not saying that the charges would be dismissed in New York, but at the end of the day, human beings are on a jury. So if the federal case, if the death penalty is taken off the plate, if there's a mistrial, if the charges are reduced, that could affect the jurors in a New York State case, and the lawyers in the New York State case, which are also defending him in the federal case, could use whatever positive result they get from the federal case against him. There's also the concept of jury nullification, which we've covered here, which is basically a jury decides, all right, he or she committed the crime, but we think it was justified, and they rule in his or her favor. Well, all this preponderance I've given you of basically trying to, the government's not like putting their thumb on the scale. They're putting their whole fucking body on the scale to try and lock this guy away and quickly give him the needle. Why? Because he allegedly killed a wealthy healthcare or health insurance executive who, by the way, while CEO of United Healthcare, was helping United Healthcare using artificial intelligence deny more patients' claims at a 90% error rate. Which, speaking of, I plan on recording a video on the artificial intelligence apocalypse later today, because right now we are basically, think about like 2005, 2006, 2007. For those of you who remember, there was a few people kind of sounding the alarm. Hey, this housing house of cards, these shitty fraudulent mortgages that they've been handing out, the house of cards is about to fall. We're going to have a big economic crash. And the politicians ignored those few people who were sounding the alarm. The media ignored it. Well, I'm telling you here, I am sounding the alarm. Similar to that, we are headed for a fucking AI iceberg. We're going to have mass layoffs in this country. And that is not dramatic to say, because companies which are buying off our government and have been buying off our government forever and ever, they are meticulously trying to lay off workers, replace them with robots and learned language models. You already have new numbers coming out about elevated unemployment among entry-level workers, college graduates, and it's going to get worse for all ages. So that's a different story we'll get to. But I got to tell you, I think that Trump's absolute disgust and disregard for the law in this case could potentially free Luigi Mangione. I want to show you a couple of clips from our on-the-ground reporting that I think are relevant when it comes to this ruling, which, again, a judge very clearly ruled the Trump DOJ, Pam Bondi, has violated Mangione's rights to a fair trial, and I think there's going to be consequences from that. I want to play this clip. This is from our on-the-ground reporting outside the courthouse last week while Mangione was in there, from one of Mangione's supporters, specifically on the fact that terrorism charges were brought against him in the first place. This was, by the way, after a couple minutes after the news came out that Mangione's terrorism charges have been dropped. Let's play that.
What are your thoughts beyond the healthcare? I mean, geez, Dylan Roof, who do you think this charging him with terrorism in the first place was basically because of the victim? He was one of the wealthiest CEOs in America.
I think that they only viewed it as terror because it was against someone that was rich and powerful, and they thought that they all started quaking in their boots and, hiring all their private security teams. But, when an innocent person or an innocent child is gunned down on the street, that's not terrorism. Even when they've written a neo-Nazi manifesto, that's not terrorism. So, like I said, terrorism is a label that was created to fit the needs of the state, to label people who are viewed as enemies of the state. And I think that anyone who tries to challenge the existing relationship between the government and corporate healthcare is considered a threat to a lot of people's campaign donations.
I would argue, to be honest, I'd love your thoughts. When you create a system where families could lose children, loved ones, if they can't pay, that would terrify me. What's the definition of terrorism, which is basically to infill societal fear, terror? It's pretty terrifying to basically create a system of essentially SOL.
I feel like, in my opinion, when you see all of the terrorism that's being inflicted right now by the U.S. government onto its own people, whether it be ICE literally hiring bounty hunters to black bag people on the streets wearing masks and grab them and just send them off to El Salvador, whether or not they're a U.S. citizen or whether or not they have documentation or not. When you see the way that the National Guard is literally flooding D.C. to pick up trash and harass homeless people, I just think that, it's really hard for people to place value in the justice system when we've seen the way that other people have been able to get away with not being punished for actions that they really should have been punished for, like 34 felony count.
Why is that wonderful woman, her name is Celeste, why don't we see and hear from her on CNN? Fox News, MSNBC, the old dinosaur-watching Sunday morning shows. How come she's not quoted in the New York Times? I have been doing this. I mean, I've been a journalist for 15 years, but on the ground, going across America for almost 10. I could tell you 98% of the time, the actual, normal people I interview in the street, left, sometimes on the right, libertarian, no political labels, activists, community members, doesn't matter. They are more intelligent, more honest, more genuine, and more authentic than any of the hacks on our entire corporate media echo chamber. And that's why they're not featured in our entire corporate media echo chamber, because actually getting their voices out, their intelligence, their lived experience might actually pop the neoliberal bubble. Might actually pop this corporate corruption, this we're living in the United Corporations of America behind me. It's incredible that people like her, don't get a voice. And that's why what we do is so important, not to toot our own horns, but this is why we do this. Trust me, Status Coup, we just hit 500,000 subscribers the other day. We would have, thank you to everybody who has subscribed. We've actually grown 300,000 in a little over a year. But if we would not do on the ground reporting, if we would just be a hot take channel and put on a blue hat or put on a red hat, pick the side, just shit on Trump 24/7 or shit on Democrats 24/7 and just kind of followed what's trending, we'd probably be at 5 million subscribers. We've been around for 7 years. Trust me, it is a lot less profitable to do actual living, breathing journalism. It is a lot less profitable to, instead of looking for conflict, instead of looking for hot takes, instead of doing food fights, and instead of joining like the brosphere, actually like interviewing normal people. For example, I'm going to do a story tomorrow on the ground on Flint, on the water crisis that is ongoing for 11 years. Whenever we post those videos on YouTube, they tank because YouTube, for whatever reason, their algorithm doesn't want to recommend anything about Flint, or for a long time, Julian Assange or Amazon. A media outlet only focused on money, only focused on, a subscriber count, Twitter followers, revenue, would not do those things. And most of them don't. They would only focus on things that will draw eyeballs. And it's not right, because it's not that people don't care about those stories like Flint. It's not that people don't care about those stories like the growing list of corporate sacrifice zones growing in this country. It's that a lot of times they don't see it, because you have algorithms on platforms like these that push content that's sensational, infotainment, hot takes, and reactionary content, and don't push substantive journalism. I know I'm going on a little bit of a tirade and detour here, but my point in all of this is what we do is important, because this Mangione case, if you don't have people out there, and again, some people are like, oh, Jordan, why are you covering this so much? You're acting like a Luigi PR person. I have been clear from the beginning. I actually don't condone violence. I don't condone even assassinating a CEO. Some of you might say, well, Jordan, we've tried nonviolence. I don't condone it. Putting aside just the moral component, I don't think it's moral. I don't condone it because strategically, I don't think it's smart. If you start in bulk going to whack CEOs, trust me, it will boomerang back on the proletariat 10 times worse. 10 times worse. I understand that at a certain point, as JFK said, when you make peaceful revolution, a peaceful resistance impossible, you make violent revolution inevitable. That is true. But I'm not covering this to be a Luigi stan. I'm covering this because, to me, there is a much, much worse murderer out there than the alleged person in this case. A murderous for-profit capitalism system, specifically a murderous for-profit predatory health insurance system, which is basically no different than the mafia, if you ask me. So if you want real living, breathing journalism out there, covering the Mangione trial, if it happens, if there's not a mistrial before that, we're going on the ground starting tomorrow in Chicago. I don't know if you have the thumbnail yet, Colin. Our cameraman, John Farina, will be out there covering Trump's latest ICE invasion, where they're throwing immigrants, men in mass are throwing immigrants into unmarked vans. It costs money to fly John to Chicago, put him in a hotel, rent a car. I just hired a new reporter who's starting next week. Costs money. We don't have major corporate funding. United Healthcare is not funding us. Okay. Wall Street's not funding us. Big donors to the Republican and Democratic Party are not writing the checks here. You are how we do this. We also want to get on the road soon to cover the aftermath of the massive Louisiana oil plant explosion that the mainstream media has completely ignored. People are sick there after a plant exploded. There is oil 40 to 50 miles downriver. There is animals dying and people are sick, yet the government, shocking, is declaring everything fine, nothing to see here. Yet another corporate sacrifice zone. So I also want to play other clips from our on-the-ground reporting that I think are relevant to this ruling that just happened. Colin, if you could play the next one.
Them trying to frame it as a bunch of like groupie girls for Luigi.
Fangirls, which I think is ridiculous. I know people who are in the courthouse today, and it's everyone. It's truly everyone.
Almost every single media person who's talked to me today has asked me, do I feel some sort of like moral, compromise from coming out to a murder trial. And to that I say, I'm not here for Luigi. I am taking it, the media is here, so I'm going to be here to talk to them about healthcare reform. And that appears to be what the initial murder was about. But you know what? They want us to protest peacefully. Then that's what I'm doing. You should actually report on that. Yeah, they've got blood on their own hands. So for them to be like coming out us and pointing their finger and saying like, oh, you support murder? I mean, look at your own news organizations. Like, look at who you get money from, okay? All these Congress people who are like, you know, Congress people who are accusing us of being morally compromised. Where your stocks are in healthcare companies. You are voting against your constituents every single day for your own pockets.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there was the people online who were commenting on his obviously attractive appearance, but I mean, can we see him right now? Are we looking at him right now? There's photos of him on that shirt over there. I can pull those up on his phone. Why would I stand out in 22-degree weather if this wasn't something that I cared about? You know, this is something that I feel very, very deeply passionate about, because this is something that has personally affected me, personally affected my loved ones. Basically, every single, like, you cannot talk to an American that has not had an experience or does not personally know someone that has not had a terrible experience with their health insurance industry. It's a running joke, and it shouldn't be.
I'm learning a little bit more about how the media is covering just large-scale events like this and the interests at hand. And I'm noticing a lot of media here today, thankfully not your channel, are going to the supporters and they're saying, you know, do you support Luigi? And oh, there's all these girls out here. Have you seen these like headlines where they're like, there's a lot of women at these protests? And apparently we got another one of these headlines today, and there's actually people of all ages and genders here, you know, just trying to fight for healthcare. And like, we're getting some kind of headlines that are just nonsensical.
We'll have a video coming out over the next few days specifically showing how the corporate media has framed Luigi Mangione supporters as fangirls and fanboys and twisted and deranged. And that's kind of the simpleton, easy way for elites who have gold-plated health insurance to look at people out there supporting an alleged murderer. And that's the problem. There is zero intellectual curiosity among the elites, not just the media, the politicians, CEOs. They don't care and they don't want to know why people are out there. To them, they'd be fine if you all just croaked out there. They don't care because they don't have to worry about getting a mammogram or an MRI or preemptive care. They don't have to worry if an emergency comes up paying for it, or if the copay's too much, or hidden medical bills. They'll be fine. So to them, they have the privilege of just looking at the black and white morality of the issue. Murder is bad. And to them, it's not even, they don't have the cognitive function to even contemplate that maybe the profit seeking, a for-profit health insurance system that basically decides life or death by how much money you have, maybe that is murder. They don't possess the cognitive functioning to even contemplate that. They don't possess the cognitive function to even contemplate, could depriving people of health care, especially emergency care, but even preemptive care, could that be a form of terrorism? I think it is. So they could easily just go to these twisted people, as Jake Tapper referred to Mangione supporters. It's deranged. Donald Trump could go on TV calling these people deranged, calling Mangione a left-wing radical. But here's the problem. I've been on the ground for almost 10 years. Next year's 10 years. And I can tell you, I have seen virtually nothing bring the left and right together, that they're unified on things. The only thing I could think of that really the left and right is in complete agreement that I have seen is water, as I've covered the Flint water crisis and cover up extensively, as you see behind me, My book published last year, We the Poisoned, Exposing the Flint Water Crisis Cover-Up, happened to have won 3 awards. No big deal. I think exposes the biggest government cover-up of the 21st century. I haven't stopped working on Flint. Nothing to announce now, but I'm still working on things. But for those of you that have read the book, you know how dedicated I am to the issue of water. Not only water, but exposing our toxic government that poisons a city like Flint and has poisoned so many others. But Flint is basically the only story I have seen, and water is the only story where the left and the right put aside their tribal differences, put aside the culture war, put aside everything. We can all agree our kids, our loved ones should drink and bathe in clean water. Luigi Mangione is the only other I saw the left and right pretty much together, to the point that Ben Shapiro, another right-wing grifter, another fucking Christian, well, he's Jewish, but whatever, I think fascist enabler, he was slamming Mangione, crying tears for Brian Thompson, and his own supporters turned on him. His own fans turned on him. Yeah, Ben, no, you're wrong on this. Because the right wing didn't understand, this is one thing, our base is victims of the predatory for-profit health insurance. Remember, people, it's hard to remember, this morning, let alone 10 years ago, when Trump was running in 2016, he said, this is not a very Republican thing for me to say, but I think the government needs to provide health care. He said that. And that was one of the phony populist left-wing positions he was taking and stealing from Bernie Sanders that a lot of his base supported. I could tell you when I went around in 2016 covering Trump rallies and Bernie rallies, I covered both rallies. A lot of Trump support, not a small amount, a lot of Trump supporters told me their number 2 option other than Trump was Bernie Sanders. And after the United Healthcare CEO was killed, a lot of Trump supporters and MAGA, maybe not like explicitly supporting Mangione, but explicitly like against United Healthcare, saying we're not losing sleep over this victim. It shocked the right wing. It shocked people like Ben Shapiro, probably shocked people like Charlie Kirk and Trump. So you're, swimming in the wrong seas here. Let's play the next one, Colin.
What are your thoughts beyond the healthcare? I mean, geez, Dylan Roof, who went and killed 9 African Americans at that church in South Carolina. He wasn't even charged as a terrorist. January 6th folks who stormed the Capitol, they were not charged as terrorists. Whether you, condone or don't condone what Luigi Mangione allegedly did, they're charging him as a terrorist. The feds are charging him. It seems like the victim here seems to be this victim is put on a higher pedestal.
Yeah, I think that was surprising to me, and I think to a lot of people. I don't know anyone. I was working in Midtown when this happened, and no one was really super concerned that he got away and he was on the loose for a while. I don't know anyone who was concerned in New York City, to be perfectly honest. So I don't know really what that's.
You and others weren't, quote, terrorized.
Right, exactly. So that's an interesting charge, and I'm curious to hear what supports it.
Yeah, apparently the only people terrorized were the CEOs, making a special request to New York Governor Kathy Hochul to create a CEO hotline of CEOs scared so that they could send in threats they deemed from the public. Because the public wasn't scared. Not at all. And now the public, again, the whole point of this, the public is who serves on juries. And this will be one of the most hotly contested jury selection processes. I'm sure you've seen it on Law and Order where prosecutors and defense, feverishly argue and try to get somebody they want on the jury or keep somebody off the jury. But in this case, it was already going to be tough to find 12 jurors in New York or anywhere else that don't have some bias or disgust or distaste for the health insurance industry. And now with all of these clear violations of Mangione's rights, clear prejudicing, they don't even use the terms alleged. Think about it. The attorney general didn't say alleged killer. The president doesn't say alleged killer. The deputy chief of staff doesn't say alleged killers. members of the Department of Justice are tweeting and retweeting derogatory things about him, basically calling him a killer. You have Deputy Chief of Staff calling him a communist revolutionary, part of the radical left-wing Antifa, whatever. I mean, journalistically, if you write a story alleging something and you don't say alleged, you could be sued. That's just journalistically. But we're talking about a life or death sentence case, and they're not using the alleged at all. They're basically implying he's guilty. So that's how serious this is. And, you know, listen, the legal system here, the laws have been violated. The laws are being applied and not followed at ease. You have a Supreme Court here who doesn't care about the Constitution. They're reinventing it based on their partisan right-wing agenda, extreme agenda. But in this case, a lower level judges, she seems to be following the law by coming out so quickly, basically slapping the Trump administration in the face. I want to show you one more clip. Again, all of this was on the ground covering Mangione's court cases. Thanks to you supporting us. We've gotten a couple people signing up as paid members. We need a lot more people. If you want continued coverage of this case, not just on the ground, but I'm following all the court motions. If you want continued coverage of the murderous for-profit health insurance industry, I am also seeking stories on health insurance and health care horror stories. We've interviewed a bunch of people who have healthcare horror stories with United Healthcare and others. You could send us your story at info@statuscoup.com. If I can, I'll interview you. If you want this kind of journalism, you have to help me build it. Not just me. Again, I hired a new reporter who's starting next week. We have our cameraman, John, who's on the ground right now in Chicago. He'll be on the ground starting or going live starting tomorrow or Friday, covering Trump's ICE invasion there. Please, please support us if you can. I know it's not everyone could do it. You know, for some people, $5 a month is too much. But for those who do have $5 a month, we also have $10 a month memberships, $20 a month, and $179 annually. But for those who can't afford it, it's not going so we could have a lavish lifestyle, a lavish dinner. It's going to actual living, breathing, on the ground journalism. And for those that say, Jordan, stop begging for money, I will proudly beg the people, the working class, to help us build it. I would, if I don't, then you're going to get mad if I go begging billionaires, which I will not do. But the choice is beg you or don't do it. Beg you or close up shop. The lights go off. So I proudly beg you. All right, one more clip from our on-the-ground reporting.
So I'm out here today because the top 1% who puppeteer these mega corporations and these for-profit health insurance scams are realizing that their days of acting with total impunity at the cost of human life are numbered. That is why they are charging Luigi Mangione with terrorism, because they are so afraid of people realizing what a scam for-profit health insurance in America really is. But I think that the veil has already been lifted. These corporations think that they can play God and pit everyday hardworking and honest Americans against one another who really all just want the same thing, an easier life. And they do this using petty conservative versus liberal politics, when really it's not about that. And I think that Americans are smart enough to realize that. I think that this case should not be called Luigi Mangione versus the people, because Luigi Mangione's alleged action actually stood up for the people. I believe that this case should really be called the people versus the for-profit health insurance scam, aka the most destructive and insulting and fatal thing ever brought onto innocent Americans in this country.
Again, you wonder why people like that are never on CNN? I wonder why. And by the way, I've been out there at every court case, or I or another reporter has been out there for us. And I'll tell you, there is a long, long row of cameras, reporters from local outlets out there. Very few of them, they're all kind of lined up behind a little gate. Very few of them come out to actually talk to supporters of Mangione. When they come out, it's usually just to get a little video to put in their news packages. Maybe they'll ask one question and then they'll leave. They don't seem to want to be bothered going in depth with them. They're not asking them, do you have any personal healthcare horror stories? A CNN reporter, I remember a couple months ago when he was out there, I was close to him, and I just heard his go-to question was basically trying to connect them to you support murder. And I didn't know at the time, but the reason he was doing that was he was planning on using interviews with Luigi supporters in a documentary for CNN about political violence and extremism. So they painted Luigi supporters in that documentary as supporting political violence and extremists. So basically he was out there trying to gather stuff for his narrative to say that the people out here are extremists and supporting political violence. He wasn't asking, why are you out here? Do you have a loved one or yourself that's dealt with a healthcare horror story? Have you lost someone you love because of private health insurance? None of that. So that's what's going on. Let me get to the super chats. Again, we don't expect for the actual trials to begin until early 2026. But it seems like every week or so we have a new motion being filed in this case. Again, there's the federal case against Mangione. There's the state of New York against Mangione. And then you have the Pennsylvania case. So there's a lot of moving parts here. So I would expect to see more reports from me well before 2026. And again, I would be very shocked if we did not see Luigi Mangione's attorneys in the next day or two filing a motion just to dismiss the charges outright based on Trump's Department of Justice. Completely illegal, completely unconstitutional violation of Mangione's rights. Let me read some super chats here. Smokey the Bear, Smokey Graybeard became a YouTube member. Thank you so much, Smokey Graybeard. Lizzie, $5. Nothing to contribute, Jordan. Thanks for your coverage. Well, you did contribute $5. Thank you. And don't go anywhere, by the way, because I do have a public service announcement. That's important. Rochelle, $5 super sticker. Thank you. Diane, $9.99. Thank you. Kelly Lynn became a Status Coup YouTube member. Thank you, Kelly. Chloe Rice became a YouTube member. Thank you, Chloe. Marco Gonzalez became a YouTube member. Thank you so much. The Ugly Doctor became a YouTube member. Thank you. Jeremy, good question. YouTube algorithm doing its crap again. I'm subscribed and a member, but had to search for Status Coup to see this. Okay, so we're going to do an explainer video on this. Our producer, Michelle, is working on it. But I want to explain something to you. And I think Kyle Kalinske did a video on this. And when I say I want to explain it to you, that means Colin's going to come on and explain it to you. Because YouTube, they love to change their algorithm in secrecy and not tell anyone. And that's why a lot of times Status Coup will be like really hot and will be growing and our views will be significantly up. And we think we finally beat the YouTube algorithm. And then all of a sudden our views crash back to earth. And then you find out, oh, YouTube changed its algorithm to basically hide us again. And apparently, Colin, YouTube recently in August, I think, changed their algorithm to basically age restrict channels or users, even those that are not minors, using AI. Can you explain what they did and why it's important that all our audience check their settings?
Yeah, so basically what YouTube did is they're integrating AI to basically look at people's video search history, and stuff like that, and based on that determine basically how old you are. So if you just happen to be a fan of content that skews towards under 18, YouTube's going to assume you're under 18 years old, even if you're a 55-year-old, and will auto-restrict, and sometimes you'll get prompted and this is why you'll sometimes get a prompt asking for it to like verify with like your license and stuff. But in the meantime, one thing it does change automatically or can is your restricted mode. So if you're on your phone in your YouTube app, just click on your profile icon in the top right and click settings, and then you can toggle. There's a little toggle for restricted mode that you can toggle on and off. If you're on desktop, right here, you just click your icon in the top right, and it's actually right here, restricted mode. You see mine says off. If yours says on, just click on it to switch it back to off. And so that's one of the things is restricted mode does a lot of things of obviously restricting what you can do. That's only one aspect of it. The AI aspect is still another aspect on top of it. But for now, that's something, at least in the meantime, you can do to double check that.
But why that's important, if you've been set to restricted mode, you're not going to see our content. It's not going to show up in your subscriber feed. You're not going to get notified. And there are more and more people looking now and seeing, oh, I was put on restricted mode. So we noticed that why can't I find anything about this in the media? Because the mainstream media doesn't care if YouTube is hiding it. Trust me, this is not affecting CNN's YouTube channel. It's not affecting MSNBC's YouTube channel. It's affecting us. And this is why I have pushed so hard for people to join our Substack, which you could join for free. Because unfortunately, as a business, and we are a business, we have to grow. We have to be able to pay people. It's really not a good strategy to be overly reliant on YouTube. Obviously, YouTube is, for better or worse, our main video platform, but it changes its algorithm all the time. And a lot of times through that algorithm change, it makes it so people do not see our videos, don't know where we're live, don't know when we break news. So that's why we're trying to grow specifically on Substack, as well as Instagram, TikTok, so that people will find our content all over the place. So that if YouTube's not notifying you, or if YouTube one day does the nuclear option, demonetizes us, gets rid of us. Obviously, there's been periods where the government, big tech is more pro-censorship than others. But why signing up for our Substack is so important, we do original reporting there. We post when we go live some of the time. Specifically when we're on the ground, we post when we're live there. If we need to post, like, per se, directions, we'll post it on Substack for you to check your restricted, if you've been put on restricted mode. But bottom line, sign up for our Substack, which, again, you could sign up for free there. We do have a paid option too, but you can sign up for free. You'll get our written articles. You'll get on-the-ground reporting, and another way of knowing when we're live, when we have videos, et cetera, et cetera. And we're trying to grow there anyway. So the more people that sign up for free on Substack, the more Substack will share our content. I've been doing more written pieces there. People have been asking for more written stuff on top of the videos. So that's what's going on there. But bottom line, YouTube, I mean, the CEO, who died since, but the CEO years ago openly admitted that YouTube was propping up what they deemed authoritative news, which they called CNN and MSNBC, which is a joke. And they were prioritizing smaller channels, meaning independent media. And that still exists. So that's why channels that do actual living, breathing, on-the-ground journalism that goes against the status quo, journalism that goes against capitalism, they are not prioritized on YouTube. We are not recommended as much as, other channels. So that's why we rely on you. That's why I push membership so hard, so that we don't have to worry as much about views and this and that. Because if our revenue is coming, for the most part, from our paid members, then some months we do good on YouTube, some months we do bad. But as long as we have enough revenue coming in from our paid members, we don't have to go clickbaiting or, traffic chasing or anything like that. All right. I think I got everything. Oh, hold on. 222. Jeremy gifted 1 YouTube membership. Thank you, Jeremy. Jeremy said that algorithm process makes 0 sense. I think it should be illegal, because bottom line, we're talking about censorship. What YouTube is doing through its algorithm, what Elon Musk is doing through his Twitter algorithm, what TikTok is now doing through a bunch of billionaires that are trying to buy it. They are shadows. It's called shadow censorship. They are picking winners and losers by algorithmically propping up some content to be shown to you and hiding other content. That's not a free and fair internet. That's just big tech companies choosing winners and losers. So you see some outlets that, their content sucks, but it's pretty vanilla, pro-corporate, pro-status quo. It's pro-Democratic Party, pro-Republican Party. They excel. but channels that actually cover, communities being poisoned by the government and corporate America. You don't see their content. Channels actually covering. We've covered over 200 anti-genocide, pro-Palestine protests in New York City, D.C., L.A., Chicago. Half the time, people don't see it. Channels covering Amazon and other corporations exploiting and oppressing their workers. Channels covering corporate sacrifice zones like East Palestine, the environmental disaster there, the oil plant explosion we're covering now in Louisiana, the fire that happened in Conyers, Georgia, that's made a lot of sick people there. We're the only ones covering this, and unfortunately, a lot of times people don't see it. It really frustrates me when I see subscribers say, Jordan, I'm not seeing your videos anymore, or I'm not getting notified. I wish there was a solution to it other than click on the bell on the YouTube homepage. Make sure you click on the subscription bell and choose all notifications. Doesn't mean you'll get it all the time, but make sure you're clicked for all notifications. And if you have clicked for all notifications in the past, go back and make sure it's still clicked on all notifications, because sometimes YouTube takes it off all notifications too. We've had that a lot where people tell us, hey, I chose all notifications and I went back and it was unchecked. Thank you, MC, $10. Thanks for keeping us informed about what's really going on. Absolutely. Starch, Stephen Miller, aka Pee Wee German. I like that one. That's funny. Denise, $2. Congratulations on 500,000. Happy dance. Happy dance indeed. And onward. Okay. Before we go, a reminder, we'll be on the ground starting tomorrow in Chicago. Please support us there. Sign up for our Substack, like I said. I just posted a new report yesterday on the latest Amazon fuckery. They are giving a raise of 50 cents to New York workers while preparing to fire them and replace them with robots. So that's up on our Substack. We have another video coming, I think, in an hour or two. A great on-the-ground report our producer Michelle did on a lawyer who used to work to deport criminals who's now fighting the Trump administration's ICE terror. So we'll have that and more. Thank you so much for supporting us. And thanks for the super chats. You can sign up at any time, statuscoup.com/join. A reminder, as a paying member, you get access to our monthly members only call, which we'll do either next week or beginning of October. You get merchandise discounts and exclusive membership content from our on the ground reporting. Have a good day.